Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rollin' 20s. We are the show that is so disgusting, Rogue won't even touch us. I am Jeremy. I'm sitting here right now, and the reason why I made that particular joke is because I'm still editing the panels from Great American Comic-Con this past December 3rd and 4th from the Cashman Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. I had the extreme honor of hosting a number of panels, including the next one with Micheal Golden. Now, that was not a name I was overtly familiar with. It turns out he doesn't count himself as a comic artist. He thinks of himself as a professional illustrator and an industry illustrator, which, you know, I shouldn't say thinks of, because obviously if you listen to it, you understand that he is a professional illustrator. The man does art for a living, not comic books. That is not his biggest passion in life. So you're wondering, why would I bother to talk to him? Why was he at the convention? Well, there's a very simple reason for that, because Micheal Golden worked in a lot of Marvel books in his stint in comic books. But probably his biggest claim to fame right now is that he worked with Chris Claremont while they were at Marvel, and Micheal Golden co-created the X-Men character Rogue. The lady in the green and white, the one who had that leather jacket in the 90s, probably one of the most enduring X-Men since the 1970s. He's responsible for co-creating this character, and I want you to really listen to this, because it turns out that where Chris Claremont took Rogue after her introduction into the X-Men was very different from what Micheal Golden had thought of when he helped create the character. Wait till you find out what he thought of Rogue and her capabilities as a comic book character. So, please sit back, relax. I hope you're enjoying your holiday season. Grab a cup of hot cocoa and listen to Micheal Golden. The panel is called Storytelling with Micheal Golden. Enjoy. Okay, now.
All right, we're good.
My recorder just had a heart attack.
I don't think it was a heart attack.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you know who this gentleman is?
See?
Okay.
We're starting off on the right foot here.
I will make an admission. You know, I'm supposed to do this not as a living. I'm a podcaster. I generally know a lot about comic books in general, but I didn't know much about this man until I started doing my research. And when I did, I figured out there's a whole lot I got to figure out about this guy, because he has worked on a number of characters, most of which have ended up or are going to end up in movies. He is the co-creator of the X-Men character Rogue. This is Mr. Micheal Golden. You can applause if you want. It's okay.
Well, I also created the Nom comic book, which became the Tour of Duty TV show. You're probably the only one that remembers this show. All the rest of you are way too young. I also co-created the Micronauts, which J.J. Abrams is going to do a movie of.
Which are now living on as a part of the Hasbro universe.
Right. It's also. I was just going to say it's that we've already redesigned the toys, so they'll be coming out. Co-created Bucky O'Hare, another toy that is now in relaunch. You'll be seeing those toys showing up here shortly. Several other things, but I can't think of them right now. I was also special projects editor over at DC Comics, and I was also Marvel's senior art director. But my day job is as a graphic designer. I've been a commercial artist since the early 70s. I have worked for everybody from Abrams Books, Bandai, NASA, NASCAR, Phillips, Procter & Gamble. I was on the design team for the Tide NASCAR. I also was on the designs team for the Viagra NASCAR.
That meant a lot to a lot of people, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, my major input on it was make it blue. Again, there's not too many here that are old enough, but if you had been down to the Kennedy Space Center down in Florida, you would have seen the mural I designed for their visitor center. I was also on the design team for the underwater cafe, the ill-fated underwater cafe at Epcot.
Oh.
I told them the thing was going to leak. And I did. I really did. I told them. It's like, look, this is Florida. You know, this all shifts around down here. You got to have this and this and this and this. And they ignored me.
I completely believe you, but there's always somebody that demands fish with their coffee.
Yeah, well, true. Yeah. And the thing is it's not real water. But anyway, 2 years later, they had to close the thing down, and it no longer exists. Well, it's still down there. You just can't go in it.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Shoot.
I actually read that Art Adams cites you as a big influence on his work.
Everybody after 1981 is influenced by my work. That's not bragging. It's just a reality.
I'll take that at face value.
Yeah.
Keep me alive.
Yeah.
What work do you think was the biggest influence on these artists that came up after you?
That, I think, is specifically relevant to each and every one of those artists. That, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I've influenced, Jim Lee considers me one of his biggest influences. Everybody after Art Adams, almost all of the Image guys, the original Image guys.
Right.
Todd McFarlane, and pretty much anybody else. Yeah, they're all over the place. Yeah.
Okay, and you touched on it before that you helped create the Micronauts, which is not just being reborn as a comic book. It's going to be part of Hasbro's new cinematic universe, tied in with Rom the Space Knight, Transformers, and I think they're going to tie that into Mask and G.I. Joe.
Right.
Now, give us a short explanation of the series, because I can see a few people watching me use the word Micronauts, and they think I've had a small stroke.
Well, I don't know what the new precepts are. I haven't even read the new one from IDW yet.
Okay.
So I really couldn't answer that with any kind of fidelity. I'm not sure.
Right.
The original concept of the Micronauts as a toy was the only toy of its kind at the time. It was totally unique. It was a toy that was totally interchangeable. Now, today, all of you are going like, so what? At the time, it was the only one that did this. You could take the parts from any one of the various character toys and interchange them with all of the others. And they had a trademarked gimmick, or a way of doing this, not gimmick, a way of doing this, an actual mechanical thing that allowed this to happen. Nowadays, it's no big deal, but back then it was a one-of-a-kind thing. And I worked for Marvel, creating a comic book series from it. It was award-winning in its own context. And it's influenced a whole bunch of other spin-off things since. That's the short version.
And what do you think of these characters now as part of this larger cinematic universe? Do you think they'll fit in?
Well, like I said, I don't know how they're doing it.
Okay.
So I really can't give any insight into that. I've helped redesign the new set of Micronauts toys. And I've been attached to Hasbro at the hip for 40 years. I helped design the October Guard for G.I. Joe.
Oh, you just hit me in the childhood.
I hope it was good for you.
It's okay.
I don't hear you gasping for breath. It's all right then.
I've been married for 10 years.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Somebody beat me to it. And I know most of you didn't get those jokes, so don't worry about it. No, I worked with Hasbro on the G.I. Joe stuff. They did the merchandising, the original merchandising on Bucky O'Hare. And I've worked on a whole bunch of other stuff with them that I had to sign a non-disclosure at the time, so I don't even know what what they're doing with it now. Wow. I'm not sure I can speak about it now because I don't remember there being a date on it.
I'm afraid to ask you a question because as soon as I start, there will be a red dot, like right back here.
yeah, okay.
But you've done a lot of work on characters that have a pretty big multimedia presence today.
I have been privileged enough. I've been lucky enough to be attached to some of the most popular products and properties out there.
That includes things that are appearing recently, like Howard the Duck and Doctor Strange.
Yep.
Do you think you had a big influence on the development of these characters?
Doctor Strange, I would say. Howard the Duck, maybe not so much. Doctor Strange, yeah, I mean, there's a whole 3 generations of creative people, not just in comic books, but I mean everywhere.
Right.
That saw my Doctor Strange work and you know, have incorporated it into their own creative efforts. Even George Lucas has acknowledged that, you know, he used portions of my Doctor Strange story in his Star Wars venue at certain times. So
I have to rewatch the movies now.
I didn't mean for that to happen.
And you are credited as a co-creator of the X-Men character Rogue with Chris Claremont.
True.
And no lie, I'm a tremendous X-Men fan. So I have to ask, was the character always meant to take the kind of the brutish or anti-hero role that she seemed to take throughout her development, or did she start out just as the...
No, that's Chris. That's Chris.
That's Chris.
After Avengers Annual, where she first appeared as a villain, and I always thought she made a great villain, he took her in the direction that, for those of you who read her character now or have in the past 20 years, you know, that's all totally Chris. Totally Chris.
Wow.
I don't know if that was ultimately his original plan or not. I would guess so, because in talking to him since, he always conceived of her as being a child. But he didn't bother to tell me this on the Avengers Annual. So I made her, you know, like a 30-year-old woman, and she was late 20s, early 30s, and reveling in her powers. And then he turned around and turned her into the very vulnerable character that everybody else knows her to be. I mean, she's truly one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel Universe, but because of that power, she's also the most vulnerable.
Right.
On a very basic human level. And that's typical Chris Claremont writing. I mean, that's how he perceives his characters.
Okay, well, then I want to ask, if Chris Claremont hadn't taken the ball and taken this character in this direction, where did you see her going?
Well, like I said, I thought she was a great villain. You've got somebody who can basically steal everything that makes you as a person who you are or what you are, and she can essentially be you. That's a great power. I mean, that's, you know, and if somebody wanted to turn that to evil, which was the original concept, you know, how do you beat that? You know, how do you fight somebody like that? And also, in her creation, her first major victim was basically Marvel's Superman, Miss Marvel. I mean, you know, she's like Marvel's version of Superman, and she absorbed everything about her. You know, I thought she made a great villain, and when I drew the Avengers, I drew her as somebody, like I said, who reveled in this power. She enjoyed the heck out of it.
You saw her standing shoulder to shoulder with like Magneto and Kang and things.
Well, I mean, she took on Thor, the Vision, and Wonder Man in one one spot, and beat all 3 of them in like 3 easy punches. You know, I mean, that's cool. That's bigger than Dr. Doom level. It was only by virtue of basically attrition, like just toughing it out until she finally ran out of steam that they beat her. And then even then, they didn't beat her.
Right.
So I thought she was a great character in that way. But that's not to say what Chris has done with her since has not been, in its own context, unique and great.
Oh, right. I'm not looking for a gotcha moment or you should have done this.
No. She has become the most popular X-Men character ever created. I get a $60,000 check every year, and I'm happy. I don't care. Chris did me a warm fuzzy, and I'm all right with this. Right?
Well, you've also made the transition to an editorial level when you move from Marvel to DC. What is it like when you're moving from an artist level?
Well, no, I actually started at DC.
You started at DC?
I worked for DC for probably 5 years. Well, actually, I worked for both companies for about 5 years. And then sort of settled into DC when they had their big DC explosion, as opposed to what I'm about to tell you about their implosion. They had this marketing thing where it was an explosion. They expanded all of their books and all of their characters, and they were going to overwhelm the comic book marketplace. And I was doing 3 books a month for them for 2 years. Mr. Miracle, Batman Family, and Batman, and then a bunch of smaller pieces. I was doing 3 books a month for them, and then they had the infamous DC implosion. Does everybody know what an implosion is, as opposed to an explosion?
I think the Flash caused 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah. No, that was the beans. Anyway, they collapsed in on themselves, and short of just, instead of like with Marvel, they didn't go belly up, they didn't go bankrupt, they just pulled everything in and fired everybody. And that's how I ended up over at Marvel doing Micronauts.
So can you explain to us what an editor does? It's often in big bold letters in the credits, but not a lot of people actually explain it very well.
Well, when I went back to working for DC as their special projects editor, there is actually very many definitions of an editor. The definition of an editor in comic books alone has changed and mutated over the years. I'm not going to use the word evolved because that would suggest some sort of positive, generational, environmental thing. Let's just say it mutated, which is not necessarily a good thing. An editor is a package coordinator. An editor picks a group of creative people to produce a specific product. That's what a comic book is. It's a product. It's not really an artistic endeavor because from the word go, it is a collaboration between these creative people. I'm sure none of you have had this experience, but working with creative people is even worse than herding cats. Okay? Because they're at each other's throats. Not only can you not make them all go in the same direction, but you can't keep them from going at each other. Okay? So it's sort of like cats on PMS. It's... I know you guys don't get that analogy, but...
He's laughing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like cats that have had just way too much bourbon. All right?
And bourbon is supposed to be better for a man.
Okay. On amphetamines
there
on top of it, all right?
Breaking Bad.
Cats on crack, all right? How's that one work, okay? Working with creative people... And I'm just as guilty as everybody, by the way. I'm not pointing fingers at everybody else and saying I'm perfect. Ask any editor that's ever worked with me. The first thing they will say is, Golden is a serious pain in the ass. All right? He is not a team player, blah, 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 blah. and they're right.
Okay.
I'm really tough to deal with. But that's why they thought I would make a great editor. And I was, damn it. And there's creative people who will say quite differently. Some of the creative people I worked with really hated me because I held to what I knew to be an editor, a standard as to what I knew an editor to be. And the editor is the bottom line. The editor is in charge. The editor makes the decisions. Unfortunately, by the time I was an editor, because of the whole image thing that was evolving at that time, the Image Comics guys, it was becoming more and more creative-centric, creator-centric, where editors were making the conscious choice not to do their jobs and just dump it in the laps of creative people. Was this good? Was this bad? Well, I leave that up to the marketplace. The fact that now both Marvel and DC have gone back to an editorially centric way of doing things might answer that question. And the fact that we can't give comic books away.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
You know, I mean, that kind of answers that question. Creative-centric comic books, collaboratives, simply don't work. I stand validated. All right?
I was actually very into Image Comics when it first came out. I remember the shift away from Editorial.
Well, it was a great, theoretically, it was a great idea.
It was.
Okay? And I said it at the time, too.
Yeah.
It was a neat concept to let creative people make creative choices.
Mm-hmm. But the lack of oversight or editorial,
right.
That came into play about 5-6 years later. Does anybody remember a series called Battle Chasers? Joe Maderia did it. It was this weird sword and sorcery sci-fi kind of crossbreed. But he had his own editorial control. The first 7-8 issues came out very regularly, very bright, large books too. They were like 35 pages. The 9th issue took about 3 months to come out. The 10th issue took about 10 months to come out. And the 12th issue I am still waiting on. And that was all because they had no editor. Joe Maderia, a brilliant artist, pretty good writer, but without editorial control, he was left to do these things as he felt like it, and eventually the books just kind of disappeared from the Diamond Select. Simply because...
Well, also, in Joe's defense, that's also when they got the Battle Chasers game going.
Right.
You know, so he was being sidetracked. You know, and really had no interest in doing the comic books anymore. Comic books is a hard job, folks. Any of you thinking about being comic book artists?
Anybody pondered it?
You don't. It's not an easy job.
Okay, and I'm not
and
saying
it doesn't pay well either.
I'm not saying I hate Joe Maderia. I still love his work, but I understand that when you have so many plates spinning, one of them is going to fall.
Exactly. That's why I have never committed to doing comic books. I'm a commercial artist. That's what I do. That's what pays the bills. Doing comic books, I've never made any money at doing the actual comic books. But like I said, I mean, now after the fact, I make money. But
right. And I would imagine commercial art pays more, and you're probably also dealing with less extreme personalities at the time.
No, you should meet some of the clients I have to work with, and some of the art directors. But like I said, creative people. In commercial art, the problems, the creative problems, the editorial and the production problems, on the surface seem like they're the same, and they should be in comic books because it's ultimately a commercial product.
Right.
Publishing is publishing no matter where you go. Unfortunately, in practice, it dovetails very quickly. In commercial art, the prime directive is always the client.
Okay.
In comic books, it gets grayed out immediately. You start making compromises in comic books from the moment you get assigned or assign yourself to a project. So everything gets muddy right from the beginning. Commercial art, yeah, you get paid more, but you don't get paid until 6, 9, 10, maybe 2 years down the road. That's why there are a lot of guys who pretend to be artists in the comic book industry have never succeeded in commercial art, because they're all about instant satisfaction. You need your check at the end of the week, or you got to pay your rent or whatever, and because you're not getting paid well in comic books, it's this constant treadmill of desperation or having great deal of money. The mythology that was generated by the image explosion has done so much to hurt this industry. There were four guys who became millionaires because of the image explosion. 4 guys. All the rest of us were still working for page rate. And some of them were actually kicked out of the door, like Herb Trimpe, John Buscema, both of the Buscema boys.
You're saying out of image or out of the
No, just out of the comic book industry, because they weren't the flavor of the week. And that's the other thing that the image explosion did, is that they were always looking for the flavor of the week. And if you weren't producing what they thought was the next hottest thing, or aping Jim Lee's artwork adequately, you were out. You didn't get work. And that never happens in commercial art, quite honestly. It never happens. As long as you are addressing the needs of the client and the client is happy with you, you will always get work. It's keeping the client happy that's the problem, because the client usually has his head up his posterior. But as long as he signs the checks, who cares?
Right.
You just work around it.
Well, I'm not going to ask names or companies or anything, but what's one of the more unusual, extreme, maybe funny stories you've had in the world of commercial art? Because it sounds like.
Well, I'll tell you how I discovered getting around clients. I'm about to use an analogy that little ears have to be aware of.
So you say.
No, both of you are old enough to hear this one. It's the little ones I got to deal with. There's this trick we use in commercial art, and we still use it today, by the way. It's called the big dick trick. Now, what it is when you meet with the client or you get directives from the art director, and you know that this is going to be a difficult assignment because the client thinks he knows what he wants, but clearly he's an idiot. The art director is giving you all of these art directives that not only don't make sense, but may in fact conflict with themselves. Once you got that understanding, you fall back on the big dick trick. Now, the way we used to do it was we would do the artwork that they actually asked you to do, and you do it the way they asked you to do it, right? But then you do a couple of overlays on acetate. And on those acetates, you do the most horrendous, offensive, disgusting, bad things that you can do, all right? Guys with big dicks, cars that look like phalluses, whatever it is, just so it is so offensive.
I can see you smiling, saying you did that somewhere.
But here's how it works. Because then when you turn in the artwork and you hand it over to the client just goes through the roof. Right? I mean, they're so offended by this that, they lose their minds. And you go, no, okay, just relax, we can fix this. And you peel off the acetate. You peel off the big dick. And all of a sudden, here's this artwork that you probably did in 10 minutes and that you're going to get $20,000 for. And because you just removed the most offensive thing that they've ever seen, they are happy as clams to accept it without changes. Okay? And it works. Nowadays, it's even easier because we got Photoshop. All right? Now with Photoshop, we don't even have to draw the big dick. We just take it off the internet, slap it on there, on another layer, turn the whole file in. Same thing happens. They go ballistic, and you go, oh, no. Check out the file. There's 2 layers on there. Take off that other layer and see if they're okay with that. Sure enough, you get a message back from the art director that goes, yeah, he loves it. Any changes? No, he loves it. We're good. Check's in the mail.
This sounds like a South Park script.
Could be, but that's how it works. Now, it sounds funny, and it sounds, like you said, like a South Park script, but it works. The thing is you've got to know how to play it. It's like a poker game. You got to be able to read the rest of the players at the table. Because you run the very serious risk of just being so offensive that the client says, I'm never going to work with it, or, I hate this so much, I'm, withdrawing my account, and the art director will turn around and says, you're never getting work with us again. There's fine lines to walking this, but in anything, when you are dealing with the public or with clients, you gotta have a fair amount of political savvy. Maybe not business savvy, but political. You have to be able to read people, and know who and what you're dealing with. When I began my story, first thing I did was look around, see if there were any little kids here. All right. Because I don't want some parent coming back at me or on the internet or to the convention and telling them that Micheal Golden was so offensive that, I hate him forever and I'm never going to expose my little kid to him again. That's the way you work it.
Okay. I do have a question when I was researching your history. I read for a while that you took a large break from conventions.
Yeah.
You've been said to have said that you didn't like the cult of personality at conventions, and you didn't appear for almost 2 decades.
Right.
How did things shift to where you feel comfortable coming to these now?
Well, now my problems with appearing at conventions hasn't changed. No, those issues are still there. I don't like being considered a celebrity because I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a trained SEAL. I'm not a clown. I'm not here to entertain. But I also have come to understand that there is a role for people like me that have created some of the most popular products and properties in the industry to not only maintain the popularity of some of those properties, to my own benefit, I admit, but also, to be an ambassador of sorts. You guys like these things. You like Doctor Who. You like Star Wars. You like whatever. You like Doctor Doom, whatever. And because of my role involving all the various properties in industry, I can help not only those properties advance or at least maintain, but also help or be part of you guys' enthusiasm. I'm not from the land of big signatures. I don't have a big head about it. I'm not going to lay my ego on here and tell you how great I am, and then you'll pick up one of my comic books and goes, God, this sucks. No, I just drew it. That's it. Or I just wrote it. And if you like it, that's great. If you didn't like it, come up to my table and tell me so. And that's what I'm here for, because that's okay. And the convention started paying for all of my expenses. Yeah, that was a bomb. All right.
Well, what kind of fan experiences do you like to have at conventions? Just conversations back and forth?
Well, no, it's people coming up and going, you affected my childhood, or you changed my life. It took me a long time to wrap my head around those kinds of statements. Because I'm sitting there going, dude, it was a comic book. But then they tell me their stories. It's like I was in a broken home, and my mother was, an alcoholic, and she beat me, and I didn't have any friends at school because of, this and this and this and this, and I would come home and I read your comic books, and it was my one avenue of escape for, that few moments in time. Or it affected how I grew up. A lot of the guys who grew up reading my nom or whatever, grew up reading. This is the guy who runs this place, guys. Everybody give him 2 thumbs up here. Yeah? All right.
Hey, this is the master right here, so.
Yeah. See, that's the way this always goes. All right. Or the guys who grew up reading, G.I. Joe or the Nom, and they say, well, it made me want to go into the military. I'm going, I'm so sad to hear that. But then, like with the Nom, there's a lot of guys who come up and they go, it's like, I was a little kid when I read that, and, my father was a Vietnam vet. And it gave me a little insight into what his life and experiences were like. And so I showed the comic book to him, and he was going, and it would break down that barrier between them, for that short period of time. And they would get, it would help families come together in certain ways. That's touching, that's profound, and it tells me I did my job well.
Actually, in regards to Nam, I didn't see that you had a military record. Do you?
No.
Okay. What kind of research did you do when you were writing that book?
Well, I didn't have to do any research. I don't have a military record, but I certainly know all of the material.
Okay.
And I won't go into that. That's one of those secret stories I won't ever tell anybody.
You stole Hoover's files?
Yeah. I knew the stuff, and the editor knew I was more versed in it than even he was, and he was a Mac Bolan wannabe. Again, I'm sorry. I know none of you guys know who Mac Bolan is, but that's how I became involved in it, is because I was literally the only person who could have done it.
I can see that. All right. Does anybody have any questions for him before we go on? Go ahead, sir.
When you did Avengers Annual number 10, Mr. Golden, was there as I understand, you did a cover for that, but it wasn't... No,
I never did a cover for it.
Oh, are you...
I know what you're referring to, so I'll go ahead and explain it.
Yeah, I love that.
No, the editor, who I believe was David Kraft on that job. Yeah. But at that point in time, Marvel was playing musical editors. So I'm not sure who was ultimately making the decisions, but what they did is, for some reason, they wanted that cover image on that cover, on that book. And so they sent me the cover sketch. I forget who did it. Probably one of the in-house art directors did it. I had already established myself as the premier cover artist at Marvel by that time. So the first thing I asked was, well, why didn't you just ask me for my idea? Why didn't you ask me to do it? And ultimately it was that they just wanted that particular kind of cover. Now the cover, for those who don't know what it is, it's like a montage of all of these little images. They wanted to say it was a throwback to the 1960s Marvels, but I don't ever remember seeing anything like that back then. So anyway, I said, well, no, how about I do a cover sketch and you'll get, and I freely confess that I said, you'll get a better cover. All right? Wrong. Okay, back then you didn't get in the editor's face and tell him he was an idiot. All right? This editor or editors were very much locked into that one imagery collage thing they wanted to do. When I refused to do it, they turned around and Al Milgram was walking down the hallway and they said, you want to do a cover? And Al's got 3 kids he's putting through school. He says, sure. The next day, he probably went straight to the bullpen and did it right there. No offense to Al, but it looks like it. All right? And that's how that cover got done. Now, the image that you're thinking of was sort of based on the cover sketch that I turned in, but it was done as a personal commission for a guy in France, I'm going to say, Spain or France. And because he knew that I had turned in an original cover sketch at one point. I don't know how he knew this. I guess it's one of those underground gossipy kind of things everybody knows, urban legend thing. And he paid me almost 30 grand for that, and that's the image that you're thinking of. Yeah.
Why didn't they print that? The interior art is so iconic, beautiful.
Well, we've already cut a deal with Marvel to do that on one of their to finish, for me to do the coloring on it and repaste it because it's got to be rearranged so the logo and everything can fit on it. But we've already cut a deal for that to be I forget what they call them.
Variant?
A variant cover, yeah, for one of the summer issues of Avengers at some point. We've already made the deal. We were supposed to do it for San Diego last year, but I just didn't have the time. So, any other questions?
What were you up to that had your time cut short?
I'm a commercial artist. That's what I do. Between going to shows and doing, trying to maintain my commercial job, my time for comic books is pretty much non-existent.
Okay, so you don't retain a strong tie with the companies right now?
Well, I never have. I mean, it's work for hire. It's basically pissing into the wind. It's a waste of time and talent. It's like working for Burger King. It's great if you need the money. It's a great place to start out, don't get me wrong. It's where you can learn your chops. It's where you can learn whether you can actually do the job or not. But ultimately, the big money is in your own restaurant. Okay. If that's what you want to do, then you ultimately got to go get your own restaurant, or buy your own Burger King franchise, whatever it is. But I mean, standing behind the counter flipping burgers is, or in this, to explain the metaphor, sitting there, turning out 2-3 pages a day, having to go off to an inker in, Timbuktu, who has no idea how to draw and has been hired to be an inker because they have Photoshop skills, and then go off to a colorist who, again, has no clue about storytelling or color theory, just happens to have a computer that they put Photoshop on. and then be manhandled by an editor who has no understanding of the story to begin with, and do this for less than $100 a page now for some of these guys. That's absurd. It's a waste of time.
Wow.
The only time I get involved in comic book work is if it has the potential to net me something on the back end. That sounds mercenary, and it is. Make no bones about it. Like I said, I'm a commercial artist. I'm not in this to stroke my ego. I'm not in this because I want to be an artiste. I'm in this to make a living. I'm over 60. This is not getting any easier. I can't choose to waste my time doing things that aren't going to get me a fair amount of change on the back end.
Okay, so you don't have any stories or characters that you would like to get your hands on?
No, I've never been a comic book fan.
Okay.
Yeah. Where I grew up, if you got comic books, it was in bulk at a Salvation Army or Goodwill, and my mom would buy them to keep us quiet on road trips. Because I lived out in the middle of nowhere, and so every trip was a road trip, all right?
Did you live in Omaha too?
No, for a while I did, yeah.
I spent 3 years out there.
Yeah, well, I was in western Nebraska.
Yeah. Actually, Omaha is where I got into comic books. Being half black in Nebraska, I might as well be half Martian.
Good point.
Good point. It wasn't dark enough for the one black family to play with me. All the other families wanted nothing to do with me. I was a Cub Scout. I was a good boy, but that did not matter. But the X-Men, I understood that. Transformers comics became big at that period in my lifetime.
I don't ever remember seeing a superhero comic until the late 60s.
What was it?
I think it was an old Spider-Man, a Steve Ditko Spider-Man. It didn't have a cover on it, and I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. People with superpowers, farting ray guns and all. I never could understand superheroes. But
I think I've heard that exact same set of sentences come out of my dad's mouth while I was reading comic books.
Yeah, I don't mean that as an insult.
I know.
It's just really. Please don't misunderstand that statement. It's just not for me. I mean, my heroes were guys like Kit Carson, and of course, none of you know who Kit Carson is, right?
Okay. But I don't remember why. Sorry.
Anyway, Zebulon Pike?
Sorry?
Zebulon Pike? No. Buffalo Bill Cody.
Yes.
Yeah, all you remember is the circus, right? All right. Bill Hickok,
At least nobody yelled out he was the guy who had the dog in the skin, right?
No, we had actually, Bill Hickok gave my great-great-great-grandfather one of his pistols.
Seriously?
Yeah, we had it on display in our house. Yeah.
Where'd it go?
That's a good question.
Oh, you're kidding.
That's a good question. After my mother sold the ranch, everything got boxed up. And then after she died, it never occurred to me to ask where the stuff went. Up until just lately when I happened to be back out in the Black Hills. And, of course, that's Hickok and Cody were all out there too, and it suddenly occurred to me when we were at Deadwood, they had a replica of one of his guns. And I said, no, we had the real thing. Wonder what happened to that, So Buffalo Bill used to winter his circus out on our ranch. It was there. Our ranch was there for this express purpose of supplying horses and cattle to the 7th Cavalry and the Union Pacific Railroad. Our ranch sat right on the Mormon and Oregon trails, which probably none of you know where they're at. Shame on you.
Yeah. How did it not get named a heritage site? It sounds like history just...
Well, because it's not there anymore. It's not there.
It's completely
anymore.
torn
Yeah, no, the ranch is all broken up. It's, the North Range is mostly wind farms, and the main compound, all of the paddocks and stockyards are now sunflower fields. A bunch of farmers down there now. And there's actually a housing development out on the West Range that people commute to Cheyenne and Laramie. And actually some of them probably commute to Denver too, now that the interstates are built.
I'm a little stunned, honestly.
Yeah. So I'm old enough that I remember it not having interstates. And I do. And there were no interstates out there when I lived there. So they hadn't even completed I-80 back then.
Well, you made me feel young again, I'll say that.
But yeah, the kind of comic books that we'd end up with, like I said, were, if they had covers at all, they were mostly Disney comics, like Uncle Scrooge and Mickey Mouse and Archie comics, just enough to keep a little kid's attention for those 2-3 hours it would take to drive from point A to point B.
And nowadays it's all tablets.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I have
little kids have smartphones now. That's cool. I like that.
Not mine.
Well, some of them do.
I'm tired of finding it in the back of my head.
Now, what I love about smartphones, so I live over on the East Coast now where everything is commuting. Everywhere you go, you got to commute.
Right.
It's like there's no such thing as a job that you can walk to. All right, so you're on the train, and a whole gaggle of Hispanic girls will get on. They all got mobile phones, and they're all just yakking away, and they're texting on their mobile phones. And you'll sit there and watch them for a few minutes, and you'll suddenly realize that they're all sitting in the same spot, right? Same area, but they're all texting and talking to each other on their mobile devices, right? They won't even talk to each other face to face. It's all mobile devices, They're sitting right next to each other, and all of a sudden one of them will go, and the one right next to her will start laughing. And then she'll go, and then 3 more over here, right across from them, will start laughing. It's insane. But, that's technology for you.
Wow. Does anybody else have any questions? Sure.
What mainly do you work with, for commercial?
I'm almost entirely digital. I was, in fact, one of the first guys in the industry to go digital. I helped DC Comics set up their digital art department back when the computers their memories were less than what's on your mobile phone, considerably less. It was measured in kilobytes. When we did a cover, we would have to make the cover so small so that we could actually make a file of it on anybody remember the 5-inch floppy disk?
Oh.
Yeah. Whoa. Bring on Buck Rogers. Yeah, 2 pictures. Yeah, and if it was more, if the cover file was more than say 30 kilobytes, which is like,
it might be
you would have to break it up into 2 pieces so that it could go to the printer. I mean, it was insane. But I'm one of the truly converted. I love digital. When I first got into the industry, but particularly in comic books, there's plenty of people. There's people out here in Artist Alley old enough to remember that, I would say if I could do all of this myself, I would. Because it was too frustrating to be involved in a collaborative effort, like you heard me grouse about earlier, with people who have no idea how to do their jobs. It isn't a case of being a control freak, although I'll plead guilty if I need to. It's a case of, if you are going to bother to do something, this is how I was raised. If you're going to bother to do something, with a specific goal in mind, then by all means do what is necessary to reach that goal effectively. Now, the key word there is effectively. I mean, that's why I don't say I'm a control freak. I'm open to compromise. You've got to. If you're on a deadline, you've got to compromise. When you're working in a collaborative effort, you've got to compromise. The trick is to do the job effectively. In comic books, the job effectively means not only meet the deadline, but have it make sense. That seems like a no-brainer, but have you guys read a comic book lately? For most of the time I've been involved in this industry, like I said, they hire inkers to be inkers because they're not good enough to be pencilers. That's absurd, because the inker is the guy who's in charge of the final visual, the printed product. And you've got somebody who doesn't know how to draw doing this? That's absurd. I give a lot of leeway to colorists because they're on the ass end of the production line. They've maybe got, at best, 5 days to color a 24-page book. So their job is just try to make the best decisions they can to get it done. But when I was an editor and as senior art director at Marvel, I would only hire colorists who at least understood basic color theory. If they had an understanding of basic cinematic color, that was a definite plus. But that's rare, I'm totally open to compromise, and I firmly believed that the digital format, the digital production, would open the door to so many better things. I was wrong. All it did was allow the editorial and production process to become even more compromised. You've got editors playing at being art directors. When I was senior AD up at Marvel, we had a cover come in, colored by somebody, I won't bother to mention their name, but it was pink, all right? It had a pink background. And I said, no, we can't do that. This is a comic book. I can't have a pink background. I now firmly believe that all editors are colorblind, because that editor turned around and told me that the frontal image, because of the pink background, popped and made it exciting. Now, the foreground image was gray. All right? That's why I believe that all editors are colorblind. All they see is tones. They saw a light tone in the background. They saw a dark tone in the foreground. That image must have popped. All right? Same editor. Cover came in. He sat on it for 3 weeks until we were literally, it had to go out to the printer that day. And the reason he sat on it, because he kept trading it back and forth with the colorist, because he wanted a different shade of red on one part of a character's costume. That's what Photoshop has done to this industry. I picked that cover up and I said, but that part of his costume is red. It's not magenta, it's not maroon, it's red. Make it red. I'm the senior art director, this goes out now. I said, make it red. It's red, okay? Ultimately, here's the end of this joke. So it goes out, it has to be signed off by that editor. Editor sees the final printout and he goes, wow, they got it right this time. It was red to begin with. He sat on it for 3 weeks to get it back to where it was the first time. All right? Talk about the big dick principle here.
All right.
Lord. But, the digital technology, the plus side of it, the two-edged sword of it, is that it has opened the door to an explosion of creative possibilities. You can produce comic books all by yourself because of the technology that's available to you. He can, I can, he can, anybody can. That's the great thing. Now, of course, the other side of that sword is probably most of us are going to turn out crap. All right? But that's what that kind of chaos is what brings out really great creative stuff. This is let me wax profound here about political systems. Totalitarianism demands that you do things a certain way. All right? And this is why I say I'm not a control freak. I'm not arbitrary. I am open to collaboration because I believe in creative chaos. I do not believe in totalitarianism. There are only 2 rules to doing comic books. The first rule is people are stupid. The second rule is who, what, when, where, why, and how. As long as those 2 rules are done, anything else can be done. I have seen abstract artwork done as comic books, and it was brilliant. I have seen people anally retentive draw super uber details, and the story sucked. All right? But in the middle there somewhere, the potentials for doing it ourselves, for opening this door to literally anybody is just, it's amazing. It's amazing some of the stuff you will see. People ask me, well, what do I look at now? I look at everything because everything out there is just, it's a new way of doing it. Eventually the industry will settle down. Rules will be made for the commercial process. But for the commercial intent or possibilities, there are no rules. The sky's the limit, and and the technology keeps changing and offering options. I get so angry at Adobe. I'm one of their consultants, and every time I go out there, I said, guys, I'm really sick and tired of you doing new versions of Photoshop just so you could change a shade of red. All right, we're back on shades of red. But then they'll go, but did you try this new filter we put in here? It can do this and this and this and this. And if you apply it with this other filter, then you can achieve this. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Like I'm doing a lot of gaming work commercially now too. And every time we come up with a new way of telling the story in the RPG, all of a sudden some new technology will come out and we'll go, yeah, we got to do that. We got to put that in here somehow. By the time we figure out how to do that, then all of a sudden there's something new again. All right. I'm involved with a technology that 2 years ago was a VR technology for gaming. That 2 years ago was brand new, totally profound, so unique that the lawyers couldn't figure out how to define it in contracts. All right? Now they figured out how to define it in contracts. Guess what?
It's passé.
It's passé. They've already figured out the next step. And so I'm working with this same company to take it the next step. This new VR technology they have is not just sitting there with a pair of goggles in your living room. It's something else, which I can't tell you. But it's really cool. It's as long as you've got an internet connection, I got to spill the beans. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can literally play this game anywhere. And it's not an immersive environment. It's like right where you're at. You know, it's like you're sitting here, right here, and a game character will come right up over the edge of the table, and you're interacting with that character. And it's really cool. Trying to figure out how to define this in the parameters of a winning solution is the problem. It's like, okay, this is all really cool that we can play with this imaginary character, but why? You see, I mean, that's why they bring me in on this. It's like, okay, now we need to tell the story. We've got the technology. How do we make this into a story? How do we provide incentives for the player to keep a direction and then ultimately have a winning situation? You know, it's got to end at some point, you know.
Okay. Well, we're a bit over time.
I know, people kept coming in trying to figure out what we're doing here.
Yeah, you have a table on the floor?
Yes, I do.
All right, be sure
like
to
I
visit.
said, those cards, you bring them on down there, and I'll sign them up for you, and you get a price off the prints.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Micheal Golden.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Vegas. Thank you very much.
I hope you like that. It's always fascinating to hear what creators were thinking as they were bringing in new characters and what they're doing while they're creating these images that live on beyond their times and probably even mine at this point. So Micheal Golden, he is a very opinionated guy, and I would actually like to see what it's like when he and Chris Claremont sit together, because those are two very opinionated, very intelligent men, and I have a feeling that the conversations between the two about their time in comic books, it would be hard to moderate. Thank you very much for tuning in. There's still another 6 panels to go with a lot of outstanding creators, including John Romita Jr., Brian Pulido. I have another one with Billy Tucci, Renee Witterstater, and Tim Bradstreet and Ron Wilson. Boy, I can't wait for you to hear the kinds of stories that come out of these people's mouths. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great holiday season. You will find more of our panels up on missionstarpodcast.com. Have a great one. I am Jeremy. Don't jerk and drive. Take care, everybody.